Welcome to Rise Up in Business, the law podcast for small business owners. This podcast is designed to share important legal information without the stuffy legal jargon. I'm Tracy Milacrane. Let's get into today's episode. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Rise Up in Business podcast. I'm not understating it to say this is the episode that so many of you have been waiting for, and I'm so happy to be recording this today. I talk a lot in my business about risk mitigation. You know that. I'm all about prevention being better than cure. And I am joined today by somebody who shares the same view. Laura Meyer from Meyer Insure is an insurance broker who not only do I use to support me in my business with all my insurances and my personal life, but Laura looks after so many of my clients. And the reason I've got her on today is because all the feedback I get from people that work with Laura is amazing. And we're going to dive in and answer some really common but important insurance questions. Laura, welcome. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Tracy. I'm really excited. Also a little bit froggy, so apologies.
No problem. I'm grateful for your time. And we've been chatting about this episode and some of the things that we need to cover. There is so many people that are just busting to listen to this because insurance, I find, is one of those things that people go, oh, really? Do I have to really think about that? The same way they do with their legal documents. So you and I have the same mission, which is to educate and empower people so they know what to do.
Yeah, we're a bit like soul sisters. We've got these really important, crucial aspects of anyone's business that are unfortunately extremely boring as well and sort of fall in the, I really don't want to deal with that category, or I can just quickly DIY this with some templates or some, 2-minute business insurance. It can be fatal for your business.
Fatal, that is the word, Laura. Just so listeners know, Laura and I have the true story of connecting via Instagram. So we've connected via Instagram and now we do loads of things. We spend a lot of time together talking about my stuff, client stuff, Laura's stuff. So we do, I feel like we know each other quite well, even though we haven't actually met in person, which is so many people's story these days, but we share that. And fatal's the word. Fatal is the word. So I talk so much about risk mitigation. And for listeners who are just joining us now, I talk about this in previous episodes, but for your business, your risk mitigation strategy is your business structure, your insurance, and your legal documents. So if you don't have those right, you are unnecessarily exposing yourself. Let's talk about insurance. So when it comes to insurance, and so many people have gotten in touch with me knowing this episode's coming up to ask their questions, which is amazing. Let's talk service-based businesses for the moment. And a service-based business who does not have any insurance because they think they don't need to, it won't happen to me. Where do they start?
Good question. The first place I suggest is to talk to a broker. It's the easiest way to get tailored advice specific to your circumstances. Exactly the same way as it is the best option to organise your legals is to go and speak to a solicitor. So yes, if you're a service-based business, your professional indemnity, as I'm sure Tracy's explained to her clients over and over and over like a broken record, is a really, really important insurance. Where a customer is or a client is coming to you for your specific professional advice or a design or something along those lines that they are paying you money for to achieve a desired result, there is an expectation there that you're able to provide and fulfill that contract of service. So if that service or that intangible product or whatever it is that you're delivering to that client at the end of the day doesn't perform, and potentially a breach of your contract, or there's an error or an omission in the advice design you've given them, that could leave you open to a claim against you. So your professional indemnity is the most crucial insurance for you in a service-based industry. And it really does depend on the type of services you provide as to what that looks like. Definitely not a one-size-fits-all approach. Every single service provider really should have a chat with someone who's in the know to get a bit of a bead on what it is you're actually doing as to where your exposures really lie and to be able to sort of tailor the right insurance for you. Because there's plenty of off-the-shelf policies out there. You can Google, it takes you 2 minutes, and I've done this because I've been curious as to what's out there. It can take you 2 minutes to quote and bind a PI policy, and this equally applies to public liability, online for something that they ask you 3 questions. They don't even provide you with the policy wording so that you can check what it is you're actually covered for. nor not covered for. And, all of a sudden you're putting credit card details in and wham, bam, thank you, ma'am. You've got an off-the-shelf policy that probably doesn't actually do anything for you.
That's the key, Laura. It's just in saying that, listening to you now, and I know that so many people do it and they think it's all the same. Professional indemnity, public liability, people don't know what they don't know. So they think it's all the same. And by going and doing that Google search and ticking one and providing some basic details, guess what? Fantastic. I've got a certificate of currency and I've got it and I'm covered. But what I see and what I've seen throughout much of my litigation practice earlier in my career is that people actually don't dive into the fine print on those insurance policies to see what the exclusions are until they need to make a claim. And guess what? They're excluded. So there's no cover. They've not had protection. And that's awful. So the intention with this episode is to say to people, we get it. We don't know what we don't know, and that's okay. We get it. But guess what? Going to buy your insurance policy from a Google search is just as much a risk to your business as going to buy your legal documents via a template. You don't know if it's going to serve you until you need to rely on it. And by then it's too late.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the biggest issue there is that, unfortunately, insurance is one of those things it's super, super complex. It's really, really important to get right, but it's incredibly difficult to understand. That's just the way it is. That there's definitely changes in the industry at the moment, thanks to, the Haynes Royal Commission, with regards to making it more accessible, more understandable, writing policies in layman's terms and taking out the jargon and all those things. But there is still an onus of responsibility on the person buying the insurance who is signing an insurance contract with the insurer, i.e., here's some information, you're going to give me a product and I'm going to pay you for it. There is still the onus on that person buying the policy to make sure that it is appropriate for their needs. It is not on the insurer to cover that person for everything under the sun. That's just not how insurance works. And I think a lot of the biggest misconception out there about insurance, aside from it being boring, because I think it's really interesting, is that it's a one size fits all. I have insurance, therefore I'm covered. We talk about fatal earlier. That is fatal for you. And not just in your business insurance. I mean, your home insurance, your car insurance, all insurances. But, your business, especially if you're a sole trader, and maybe that's something we can talk about later, versus a company, you are personally exposed there. So it is super, super important to make sure that the insurance you're getting is actually going to respond in the event of a claim. Otherwise, what's the point?
Absolutely. Oh, and you've so hit the nail on the head. And like I said at the beginning, risk mitigation for any small business, it's your business structure, your insurance and your legals. And you've just mentioned business structure. I've talked in previous episodes about business structure. I've written about it on the resources page on the website. There's a lot to digest when it comes to what's the best business structure for you. And sole trader isn't the best always. So let's just say that. So we're a business owner. We've got a service-based business, so we now know that professional indemnity is something that's super important and we need to get that in place. Now, I've got some clients who say to me, I work from home, it's just me. What else do I need in terms of insurance? And when clients say that, I send them off to you, Laura. But there's a little bit to think about it. When you say it's just you, sometimes you've got contractors or sometimes you've got some casual employees. Sometimes it's not actually just you, it's just you at home. But if you're like me and you've got employees virtually and remotely in different states, public liability is not something that we can just simply dismiss because we don't have an office and have people walking into our office. So in what circumstances does a service-based business who works from home need public liability insurance?
It's a really good question. It's the same situation for me in my business. I'm a service-based business and I work from home. I don't have an employee. I do have a subcontractor, but she's overseas. But I do go out and see clients. And so therefore, I do have an exposure whereby, in conducting my business, there's the potential for me to cause someone else an injury or damage someone else's property. It's pretty minimal, let's face it. Any service-based business, even if they're just going out for a coffee with a client in a completely neutral surrounding, there's never no exposure. There's never no risk. We don't live in a perfect world. However, it is pretty minimal. While there is no law, is there, Tracy, as to whether or not you need to have public liability insurance, there are obviously some industries where it is required, and product liability is obviously part of that. However, in a service-based industry, there's no one and nothing saying you have to have public liability insurance so that when you go and meet your clients, you're safe. But in saying that, in most cases, a service-based industry is going to have such a minimal exposure that you could probably make the business decision based on some careful consideration of your circumstances, whether or not you do require it. You do have to be thinking, what is my impact out there? In everything I do in my business, whether that's sitting behind a desk in my own home and not leaving the room, or meeting clients, or having an actor or an employee sitting in an office, in a share office in another state, or having a couple of employees who also work from home but might go and see clients or meet with suppliers or whatever that might be. What is the exposure that they have out there in the community? Again, it might be super minimal, but again, I think for the price of a public liability policy, which can be combined in most cases with your professional indemnity, and where you might have some minimal risk, I think it's just worth it for that peace of mind, especially if you've got more than just yourself out there, because you're not in control of other people. You know, you don't know how they're interacting with the public. In the end, it's your business and your reputation. And if there's an injury or damage to someone's property as a result of one of your employees' negligence or your own negligence, if you don't have that public liability policy in place, well, then you're fighting that battle on your own.
Without the help of an insurer. So really, I mean, you and I had this conversation in relation to a client a little while ago. Service-based business, works from home, but does have employees in other places, and that's me as well. So I absolutely have a public liability insurance policy, because that then covers my team when they're out and about doing things, whether it's going to the post office or running errands or anything like that. It just covers everybody. And so that's a business decision that I made to mitigate my risk, because if you don't have it and God forbid something happens and you're faced with a claim, whether it's contributory negligence or otherwise, if you don't have an insurance policy, you then need to defend yourself with a lawyer and you need to foot the costs of that. So if that were to happen, and you don't have insurance because you think, oh, look, I'm not going to bother. I'll just take my chances and I won't have public liability and she'll be right and I hope it doesn't happen. But if it ever did, and you need to get into that process where you need to defend yourself with a lawyer, the costs that you are going to incur will very quickly hit the tens of thousands before you even blink, really. So you've got to weigh that up in terms of the very often minimal cost of holding that policy in the first place. I personally don't think it's worth it.
Absolutely. I agree with you. It's interesting the way that public liability works, right? So it's a third-party injury and property damage. So it's protecting your business, which includes your employees. That in the majority of cases includes volunteers. You know, maybe you're just a one-man band or one-lady band and you get mum to help you out, or your bestie to help you out one weekend for something and she's out doing something and causes an accident or an injury and you don't have that policy in place. You're dealing with those costs on your own. A public liability policy, your insurer is always going to be looking for whether there was negligence involved. In a lot of cases, in most cases, you can find an angle of negligence. So that's not normally an issue. If, however, your insurer, investigates everything and looks into it and goes, well, actually, our client wasn't liable, we don't think that they were, but we're going to defend them. We're going to engage the panel lawyers and we're going to pay to tell that party who's blaming you for something to go away, basically, and fight it in court for you. So it's not just that, oh, I've done something wrong. It's also that someone comes to you and says, oh, because of your negligence or because of this, you caused this issue. And you're not actually at fault. You can still defend that using your public liability insurance. So I think a lot of people sort of think about that, what happens if I've done something wrong, which absolutely it's for, but also, what happens if I wasn't actually at fault? I still need to tell that person to go away nicely, and that's some costs. So
yes, that's so good, actually. And that's such an important distinction. And I'm glad that you flagged that. So it's not just about if you've done something wrong or if your team's done something wrong. You may not have, but you can still find yourself embroiled in this type of matter. And that's what the insurance is for. I just want to pause here because we're talking about public liability and we're talking about service-based businesses working from home, but there's a lot of businesses that still have bricks and mortar businesses. And that means that people are coming into their office. So you absolutely, without doubt, need it. So it's not even a question mark then. It's you absolutely need it. And for the clients that I deal with, lots of clients come to me because they're entering into commercial leases and there's always a provision. So we talk about the law and there's no actual law often that says you must hold public liability insurance, but there can be contracts that you enter into where it's a requirement or a term of those contracts that you do hold public liability insurance. And a commercial lease is a really good example. And that's where you deal with your plate glass insurance and you note the interests of the landlord and things like that. But that's all public liability, but that's also something you can support people with, isn't it?
Absolutely. And look, public liability is in the vast majority of cases for the types of clients that you and I deal with, Tracy, it fits nicely in a business pack insurance or an office pack insurance. It doesn't have to be a standalone large, complicated beast. There are some exceptions to that rule, but in the probably 95% of cases, it would fit nicely under a business pack, which means that you're packaging, exactly as it sounds, business or office pack, you're packaging those various risks that you have as a small business owner, talking bricks and mortar businesses at the moment, you're packaging them up in a nice little neat policy, effectively, that has your public liability section, and then it might have some property section for your potentially your contents and your stock, your business assets for insurable sort of peril damages. So that might be, if a storm comes through and rips the roof off the shop and floods the shop, or flood, for example, that's a really good example. Flood, interestingly, is not an automatic option on all of the business pack insurers. It's an optional that has to be underwritten for. As you can imagine, there's plenty of locations that you cannot get flood insurance on. It's just a very unfortunate aspect to the insurance game, I guess, is that there are some risks that are just uninsurable, just simply because insurers can't afford it. It's as simple as that. Well, it's more complicated than that, but that's the easy way of saying it. But yeah, you can package up your insurances. So you might have requirements under your commercial lease to hold insurance for your own contents and stock items, for the plate glass in the property, for your own business public liability exposures. Usually they've got things like malicious damage, and they might put riot and tempest and all sorts of weird vernacular in there. All of that sort of stuff is generally covered under a business pack insurance under the property section. So yeah, you can go and insure all of your main perils, so including things like theft or cover for your money. For example, if you've got a high volume of cash, not a lot of businesses do these days, but some industries still do. And they might be, tracking back and forth from between banks and locations with large wads of cash. So you can insure things like, theft of money and theft of property and your business interruption. That's another big slice of the insurance pie that I don't think a lot of businesses feel they need. I.e., if a storm does come in or it does flood and you have flood cover, that length of time it takes before your business is reinstated and you can get operational again, you can actually insure your lost revenue. So the money that you're not receiving from selling your goods or services, money that you have to try and retain key staff, for example, all of those sorts of things that you don't think about if you had a large loss, what it would actually mean to your business. You can package all that under a business pack or an office pack insurance.
Gosh, and just listening to you talk, I'm hoping that what listeners are taking away from this is the importance of having the conversation with a broker, because this all requires tailoring, just like your legal documents and all those things. It requires tailoring to your business. On that, this is a good segue into a question I have, and I know this is tricky to answer right now, but something that lots of people are interested in is retreats, insurance for retreats. So if you're holding a retreat, does your public liability automatically cover you?
I would say if you've never had a conversation with your insurer specifically about retreats, then no, it's not going to cover you. That's the sort of insurance you really need to be speaking to a broker about. I haven't Googled direct insurers for retreat insurance. There's a couple out there. I probably wouldn't trust them, but, you never know. They might be good. But, yeah, look, your insurance is largely based on what you do, how much you're earning, and, whether you have employees or subcontractors, so that the insurer gets an idea of what your exposure is out there in the wide world. So you might be a yoga instructor, for example. Or, you might do a bit of meditation and breath work, and you put on some classes in your, a hired hall once a week, that sort of stuff. But you want to start doing some weekend retreats a couple of hours away in, the Blue Mountains or something like that. If your insurance is based on you being a yoga instructor, it's not automatically going to be covering you for retreats. It's a whole separate exposure. Yes, it's related to the yoga, but it's not implied in giving you a policy as a yoga instructor that you're also going to be holding retreats. There's additional information that the insurer would need to know that changes the risk profile to the insurer. So the really quick and short answer to that question is no, check it. That's usually the first thing I say to people is if you are in doubt, call your insurer. So if you're with a broker, you just come to your broker. But if you're DIYing it, and plenty of you are, I know, then you need to be checking these things because, when you set up your policy 3 years ago as a yoga instructor and then probably ignored it and every renewal you just paid it, you haven't updated it. Potentially they've changed their terms and conditions. You might have just ticked a box that said, yes, I agree, and not even looked at them. They might have removed covers. They might have added, additional exclusions in there, and all of a sudden it's not fit for purpose anymore. And as soon as you want an activity that is in addition to or separate to what you do, it changes your risk profile. So, talk to your insurer. It's the first thing I say.
I love it. We're not assuming that it's automatically covered just because you're providing the same or similar services elsewhere. That's really important. And it's becoming really common now with everybody getting out and about again post, what. So it's nice that people are thinking about it to ask the questions, and it's lovely to be able to address that. Again, though, coming back to what we're saying consistently in this episode and both independently of each other outside of this episode, get it tailored for you, get your insurance tailored for you. Now, there's an insurance that you can't help with, and generally speaking, and that's workers' compensation insurance. But people, if you have employees, whether you're a company or a sole trader, you need workers' compensation insurance. So how do you go about doing that then if brokers can't help with that? And why can't brokers help with that?
That's a good question. Brokers can in some states, and do not ask me off the top of my head because I can never remember which states. I know that Western Australia and could be Queensland off the top of my head. I'm sure there'll be broker colleagues screaming at me through the speakers. They are underwritten states, we call them, which is where you'll have half a dozen insurers that provide work cover insurance, and brokers can go to those insurers to find the best rate for your risk profile, similar to a business pack insurance or other insurances. However, not the case in most of the other states and territories. For example, Victoria, where I am, and New South Wales, I think you're in New South Wales, are both wholly administered by the state governments of the state that you belong to, i.e. there are basically agents, so they're not even really insurers, and the rate is the rate. So it doesn't matter which agent you go to, whether that might be Allianz or CGU or Gallagher Bassett. There's they're different in every state. You will get the same premium going to any of them, but basically what you're getting is a different agent, so someone who administers it different to the others. So it might be their claim service is better or not better or whatever it might be. So it is wholly 100% administered through that government authority. So look, insurance brokers I could send you an application form, and I could send that off to those individual insurers, but that would be the extent of it. So really, there's not really any point in a broker helping in those instances, apart from to be able to sort of direct you to an agent's website potentially.
So I can actually ask you for help. I've got employees in Queensland, Laura, or I've got employees in New South Wales or Victoria. Where do I go? And you'll say, go, Tracy, if it's New South Wales, go to iCare. Here you go. Here's the link. And then you can have confidence that that's, yeah, okay, great. All right.
I'll usually do a little background, and, if I know what state obviously I know what state they're in, I'll jump on whoever's that particular relevant authority website. And I usually have a quick look for where the insurers or the agents are and their application links, and I'll actually send them that link and say, look, go here. And, it'll take you 5-10 minutes to do the application. In a lot of cases, I tell people to liaise with their accountant, because often their accountant or their bookkeeper is the one that has all the information about wages and subcontractors and all those sorts of things. And in a lot of cases, accountants will actually organise all of that for you. So usually first port of call is, have you spoken to your accountant about this? If they can't help you, then I would jump on this website and have a look here. And I always try and say, look, if you're unsure about whether you need it or you have specific questions, because it can be complicated, especially around working out who's a subcontractor versus an employee. And it is so critical to get that right. The best place to go is to actually call them. And usually they're pretty good at answering your questions.
Okay, that's good to know. I've talked a lot on the podcast about the importance of getting it right when it comes to employees and subcontractors for so many reasons, and insurance is one of those reasons. So if that's resonating and you've never really considered whether you've got it right when it comes to your team, then you can dive back and listen to some earlier episodes on that. Last type of insurance question, Laura, and that is cyber insurance. Do we need it?
Oh, gosh, the $1 million question. There's been a couple on this episode. The short answer to that is I think you need to be aware of it and its role in your risk profile and your exposures. I think every business, every person in Australia is at risk. It's as simple as that. But every business, especially service-based businesses where we might be holding sensitive and personal information on customers and clients, is especially exposed. And you just have to look at what's happened with Medicare and, Optus prior to them and a dozen every month that happen and don't get the airtime that Medibank and Optus have, because let's face it, the stats are scary. I mean, I wish I'd thought of bringing some stats up, but it's so prolific. These ransomware attacks are so common these days. And if they can get into the Medibanks and the Optuses, they can absolutely get into your small service-based business and cause havoc. And I'm sorry, but I don't have a spare $20,000 to spend on a ransom to release my clients' personal and private information. I don't have the money to pay for the forensic IT costs to be able to get back into my systems and restore them and make them safe again. And believe you me, they are so expensive. We're talking tens of thousands of dollars just on forensic ITs and forensic accountants and various things like that. So if you are a service-based business, you need to be thinking, what is my risk profile? What is my exposure like? What's my impact out there? And what could happen if I was hacked? And a hack or a ransomware attack can take many different forms. If you're, let's use a bookkeeper or an accountant as an example. Again, a service-based business, you might be just a one-lady band at home and have maybe, $400,000 worth of clients maybe, and you're in their bank accounts, you're transferring money for them, you're doing all of these sorts of things. I have frequently seen claims examples in my own personal practice of agents getting in and infiltrating emails and diverting funds, hundreds of thousands of dollars out the window, and without a cyber policy in place, with a third-party loss component attached to it, you've got no way of getting that money back. And, the implications of that, not only for your own business, but for your client who's lost that money, are massive. They're huge. So it's not only the third-party costs that are potentially on the line in terms of the money that could be stolen, but it's the time and the disruption to your business and what that looks like in terms of lost revenue, in terms of having to lay staff down while you're rectifying systems and it's taking 2-3 weeks. You're going to have to pay those staff and keep them happy. And in the meantime, you've got forensic IT and accountants trying to get in and out of your system, and those bills are coming in. You might need to notify the Australian Security Register. I can't remember the exact name for them, but there's huge breach costs as well. There's fines and penalties. There's so many different things that you're faced with in the event of some sort of breach or hack or ransomware attack. And sadly, cyber insurance is a reaction risk management tool, but it is important to understand how it can help to safeguard your business, because in the end, you're going to have to still do all of the things to protect your business and make sure that people can't get in, and do everything you possibly can, which insurers are now making requirements, of course, but they'll still get in. In this case, it's very much a Band-Aid. Insurance is very much a Band-Aid in this case. That's not a bad thing. It's still an important Band-Aid. So I think that it is really important for people to be impacted. And it can be really simple things about how to protect your business and your presence and what you do that can make a massive difference. So I think doing some self-education on what it is your business is doing out there, what can I do differently, what am I not doing, and what can I do to make it better, to make it safer, and then probably get some quotes on cyber insurance and get an idea of the cost involved there too, because it is sadly getting more expensive because the claims are going through the roof, which only shows you that there's plenty of it out there. And
again, you can talk to a broker like Laura to ask the question, what do I need to do to start this process of understanding whether I should or could take out some cyber insurance? And there's some forms to complete, isn't there? It's almost like an application for insurers to consider then what you've got in place for your due diligence and your protections and things like that. So that's a great place to start. That's really, really good to know. And thank you for sharing that, because it's something that I'm finding people are either putting their head in the sand or really wanting to get on the front foot with it and go, right, what am I going to do to protect my business? And that dovetails into the last question I have for you, Laura. And somebody had asked me this, and it's not something I'd ever considered, to be honest, until it was asked of me. But when it comes to insurance, is there such a thing as overkill or too much?
Yes. And we sort of bandied this around before we started recording, but there's a couple of types of clients that I see all the time. And there's the ones that just want the bare minimum. And that's understandable. There's usually cost considerations there, and I completely get it. I'm a business owner myself. We're all working under budgets. And then there's the ones that want everything under the sun. And generally speaking, they're the ones that just want to go to bed at night knowing that they're covered. They sort of have the attitude of, I don't care what it costs. And no, that's absolutely a privilege, but I do see it a lot. I would rather pay for these insurances and go to bed at night knowing that I'm covered, or, at least every eventuality that I can cover can be covered, because let's face it, insurance, again, is not a cover-all for everything. You can't cover everything. But, it's that future-proofing of their business and their peace of mind that I guess I see when clients go and insure every little thing that they possibly can. So, look, I think if you ask that person, is it overkill? I reckon they're going to say no, it's peace of mind. And whether or not they ever have to claim, who knows? But at least they know if they do that it's under control, that, they're adequately insured. They're not going to have to worry about being, underinsured and potentially being penalised by the insurer, because there's all sorts of things around that, under insurance as well. Or finding out that, that policy that they bought really cheap online because they were price conscious at the time, all of a sudden isn't going to cut it when they really need it to. So look, can you be overinsured? Oh, look, probably you could take out every cover under the sun, but I really think it comes down to the outcome you want.
I love what you said around peace of mind, and that's something that I stand for very firmly in my business, prevention being better than cure, and having the peace of mind so that you don't have that sinking stomach feeling when something goes wrong, because we can't promise, we can't make guarantees, but what we can be certain of is that something unexpected will happen at some point, whether that's insurance related or not, who knows? So how important is it to you? And I guess it comes down to your risk profile. What are you comfortable with? And to get clarity around your risk profile, if you're listening to this and you think, oh gosh, Tracy, I don't know what my risk profile is, have a conversation with a broker, because you will then start learning very quickly what your risk profile is on how you react to some of the things that the broker puts to you. Laura, this has been amazing. Thank you so much. We've answered all the questions that people have had. Obviously, some of the questions were repeats. You've answered all the questions. I think this is so valuable. If people want to find you because they're listening to this and they think, gosh, I need to speak to this woman, I've got to have this conversation, Tracy uses her, Tracy refers clients to her, I need her in my life, how do people contact you?
Best place to go is straight to the website. So if you just jump on Meyer Insure, meyer.com.au, you can find lots of information about me and the covers that I have. You can book times through my calendar if you want to jump on a call or a Zoom. It's generally the easiest way to get in touch with me. You can call me. You're perfectly welcome to call me, but I am on the phone all the time. So email and website is great.
Perfect. And so we'll put the link to your website in the show notes to make it super easy. Laura, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. This has been so valuable and it's been a pleasure talking to you.